And away we go. So hello, everyone. My name is Allison. I am the Executive Director of the Gallatin County Democrats. My pronouns are she, her. I am really excited to have this conversation, candidates and community, with Brian Popiel, who's running for House District 64, which runs from basically Four Corners to West Yellowstone, which is a lot of ground to cover. And I'm sure we'll have some questions about how you're doing that in the time of COVID. So Brian, would you please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you?
Sure. My name is Brian Popiel, running for House District 64, and got a long history here. I'm born in Montana, in Glendive, 1975. I've lived in Bozeman since 1989, Gallatin Valley, and really, my connection here is that I've been working in this district, building houses, ski lift shacks, roads, driveways, infrastructure for the last almost 30 years, 25 years right now. So a Bozeman High School grad, and kind of felt like this was the year to get involved and to try to make a difference on the state level. I've been doing a whole lot of things locally for the last 5 to 7 years, been really active with the Building Industry Association, been really active on local issues in terms of land use planning, infill development codes, that sort of thing. And really kind of felt like, given the open seat in House District 64, this was a time to sort of take that level of community service up to Helena. Mm-hmm. So here I am. It's actually my anniversary today. I've been married to my lovely wife, Sarah, for 19 years.
And you're hanging out with us?
15 minutes, just for an hour. And I've got 2 wonderful kids. They're at Bozeman High School. One's a sophomore, one's a senior. KJ, my sophomore, runs cross country. Sienna's on the debate team and active in a couple of the other clubs there. And I'm a contractor. I run a couple of different little businesses. I do a lot of remodeling, service work in construction. And then I do a construction materials recycling business. So kind of keep both of those irons in the fire. And then as a side gig, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, working with the Bozeman Field School. I should back up a little bit. Through SWIMBIA, through the Building Industry Association, we started a 501c3 nonprofit to teach building trade skills to high school students. So we partnered up with the Bozeman Field School, and we did about 2 months of sort of hands-on construction work on a tiny house before we got shut down for COVID, and we are about ready to start that up in another, I think, 6 days. We start up with the second cohort from Bozeman Field School, and we'll be working on that project up through the fall. So I'm kind of trying to balance all of that and actually run a campaign and have all my bandwidth taken up by COVID and coronavirus and everything else crazy that's happened in 2020. And so that's sort of what's on my plate right now.
That's a lot of stuff on one plate. How are you managing it?
I'm an overcommitter. I don't tell people no when somebody would like me to help with the project. When we got something on it, I do it, and I just sort of figure out how to get it done, or get it done in as close approximation to great as we can. So, House District 64 wasn't going to flip itself. And so I thought it was a chance to do something pretty important for Gallatin County and really, I think, for the state of Montana. I don't think that district has had good representation for what it is, and what it's becoming over the last decade. And so I think it's really time to jump in and work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't want to ask all the questions. I mean, I can, but I don't want to. So Denise and Emily, what questions do you have for Brian?
Well, hi, Brian. It's Denise. I'm so excited that you're running. I think it's great that you know, I think you're right. I think this district needs to flip, and, you know, starting with everybody in the past, it's closer and closer and closer. And I think you running against Jane Gillette is a great matchup. How has it been going? Have you been able to knock doors? Are you going to the Gallatin County? Are they having any at the, like the willing workers? Are they having any functions, or how is it going out on the campaign trail?
So functions are tricky, right? And we're
Yeah.
sort of setting up the same. Right? We got a whole list of recommendations, best practices that the epidemiologists are telling us, and we're sort of putting that in, and then we've got, you know, where people are comfortable, and trying to figure out where there's active space in there to do anything. So we are knocking on doors. Been getting a really positive response on that. You know, it's that House District 64 it's roughly the size of Delaware, with 10,000 people. So, you know, social distancing happens pretty naturally there. The places where I'm going out and knocking doors, and Denise knows this, you know, it's pretty easy to get 6 feet back, 8 feet back on somebody's front porch, have your mask on. And I think, you know, from a best practices standpoint, you know, I think masked and out on somebody's porch, I think most everybody's feeling comfortable with that. And people that aren't are signaling that. You know, there are a handful of people that like leave something and will support you, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down one way or the other. And but and actually what I should say, what I'm getting a lot of is like, hey, you're in a great place. I'm going to sit here on my porch. You stand back there on my driveway and let's talk for a little while. And so I am getting a really positive response on it. I'm really happy. We were dubious a little bit, I think, when we started knocking doors, but it's been good. That second one, doing any sort of events, my family, the people on my campaign are a little bit, you know, as soon as you get to that, you know, 10 people, becomes really hard to sort of maintain that best practices. So we haven't, you know, done any real in-person fundraisers. We're not really doing any get-togethers. So it's been all virtual or one-on-one, you know, up to this point.
What are you finding are some of the issues that they're dealing with in 64? And have you seen those issues since you've been out there working for many years? What are kind of some of the issues you're finding?
Yeah, you know, the old maxim about all politics being local, and you get that a lot, right? Whether it's the new sewer ponds that they built in the last few years in outside of Four Corners, on the west side of Four Corners, or you know, the people that live in maybe an Elk Grove that are very concerned about how land use looks when they talk to a builder and somebody with a background in development on what that means for parking in downtown Bozeman and affordable housing. Or you know, West Yellowstone's got a completely different set of issues. You know, we joke about them being behind the yellow curtain down there, and how disconnected they sort of are from all of the other Gallatin County issues. So, but there's some themes that I keep hearing, and I think there's the biggest theme is people want to know that I don't want to say this. People are so frustrated with the level of representation that they're getting, whether it's being lied to, whether it's rhetoric and tone, immaturity in elected officials. And so I think they're really looking for good people to they're hungry for good people to go represent them. They're looking for ethics, they're looking for integrity, they're looking for independence, and they're looking for a sort of we're all in this together mentality, and we might disagree over what the policy particulars are, but you know, we all have to come together and have backyard barbecues together at the end of the day anyway. And so that tone and that issue about what leadership is and what leadership looks like is one of the things, one of the currents that runs through a lot of the conversations.
Yeah. I have more questions and thoughts, but go ahead, Emily or Allison. I'm just happy
I'll
to be
follow
here.
up with that. You talk about a lot of people are asking about leadership or interested in leadership. What kind of background do you have in any kind of leadership roles where you think that you can offer that to them?
Sure. And I've developed, kind of a pretty good, I'm happy with the go-to answer. I spent the last, I guess it's a decade now, being really actively involved in the Building Industry Association. I call that a pretty right-leaning organization. So I've spent my professional work being elected to leadership roles in that organization, and I've never hidden my personal views, and really spent a lot of time talking through the issues and where the data and where the information take us. And so I think there's a whole lot of common ground to work on, a whole lot of places where, you can look at and say, we've got, there's not a particular ideology that necessarily leads you to the right answers, right? You have to look at the data, you have to look at the information. And then you make your best decisions and your best roles based on that. So I think that reaching sort of across, it would have been across the aisle in a previous time. I think that's maybe a catchphrase that's outlived its usefulness a little bit. But I think living and working with people that think a lot differently than you on certain ideological issues, and then coming up with ways of finding the places where we do agree, and then using that as a jumping off point to what do we do next. So that's really what we've been doing. A lot of the stuff that I've been working on with Swimbia, with issues about affordable housing in Bozeman city limits, issues about jobs and income, and that's sort of what led us to starting up the tiny house project with the high school kids. That there's an awful lot of common ground out there, and like I said, I think there's a real hunger to see people that are willing to look for those sorts of solutions to some pretty real problems that we've got.
For sure. And then I didn't quite get, you talked about a little bit about recycling. What is your current thought and stance on the infrastructure of the recycling program, or maybe lack of, in Gallatin County?
I'm one of my very early supporters is Recycling Dave, who owns and runs Four Corners Recycling, and he's been a really good, valuable insight over the years about the business of recycling and what it takes. And it's been a really, really tough couple of years between trade wars with China, oversupply in the coming from the consumer end, the stuff coming into his yard, and low prices coming out because we don't have adequately developed markets for a lot of the product that he's, a lot of the recycled product that he's trying to make. And so it's really useful to know, right? Ultimately, Dave's got to make a living running his company, and he's got investors that he's got to make sure get paid. Otherwise, they're going to shut down the yard, and Bozeman's not going to have any recycling operations, or we're going to have to start from ground zero. And so I think knowing that entire, I'm going to talk, spent a few years getting an MBA, and so I'll talk like a business, like an MBA guy, but we had a whole supply chain issues. Like I said, we've got an imbalance between the supply of materials that Dave's got coming in and what he can sell out on the market. And then we throw in all of these other issues, and whether that's, right, dock workers and Teamsters in San Francisco and Oakland going on strike because they need higher wages in order to be able to afford to stay in those places. and shutting down his supply chain, and then throw on top of that a trade war with China, right? So China won't take recyclables, and you know, they're all very real issues, and they all have really serious implications because they all cascade down and they all build on each other, and make it challenging at the local level. So if I come back to your comment about local recycling, I think we're doing a good job on a lot of levels. I'm really happy that we developed curbside, or the mixed curbside bins in the last, was that 5 or 7 years ago? Probably we put that into place. It'd be nice to see state and local governments work on. So we've done a really good job at the inputs, at the supply coming in. Now we need to really do, I think, a lot of work on the outputs. So where is it that when we bundle up cardboard and we put it on a truck to go get processed, what do we make out of that? And how do we encourage those markets, and how do we help those markets mature so there's a place for those for those materials to go? And then, so Dave can make a good living running a company, and so he can pay all of his workers there at the recycling yard, his truck drivers that go out and pick everything up, enough to live in a place that's expensive to live. And so I think like I said, we've done a really good job at the one end. I want to see state and national work on the other end on developing those end markets.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Patty, do you have any questions?
Hi, Brian. As I've communicated with you in the past, I used to live in your district, or your hopeful district. And I see, my perspective, I agree with you that this district has not been represented adequately in the House. How do you present yourself to people who are believing, are thinking about the opponent? How do you separating yourself from the opponent, and what you are looking for? How you want to represent the district?
Couple of them, experience, right? I've spent, and I don't currently live in the district, but I've spent my entire adult career working in the district in one form or another. And so I think there's a depth. I think I bring a depth of knowledge and a depth of having watched that district evolve and change in over 25 years. Call it since I graduated from high school, right? Of 25 years. I even when I'm not working in the district, you know, half or 3/4 of my suppliers and subs either work or live in the district. And so I think that intimate familiarity with it, with the people on the ground, the day-to-day actions, you know, I think that's a really critical separation. You know, I think experience and qualifications, that I've been working on all of these levels at the local, or all of these issues, I'm sorry, at the local level for the last decade. You know, I'm intimately familiar with Bozeman city commissioners, with the county commissioners, right? Sit down and talk to them, having worked with Swimbia for all these years, on what are the big issues that they face. And you know, it's kind of fun because you got a county commission that's pretty conservative, and you got a city commission that's pretty liberal. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with the same sets of problems, and they're coming at them from a fairly different starting point. And if I go back to my initial, I don't remember if you had tuned in yet or not at this point, but if I go back to my initial one, we all have to barbecue in the same backyards together at the end of it, right? So regardless of what decisions the liberals or the conservatives make about dealing with growth policy, or how we address infill, or how we pay for our infrastructure, you know, it's got to be productive. It's got to work, and we've all got to be able to get together at the you know, at Don Seifert's barbecue at the end of all of it. So that's kind of, I think And I don't think my opponent has spent time dealing with those issues. She's dealt with a whole lot of other things, and she's got experience in completely different areas.
Right.
I've got experience in Gallatin County politics and the Gallatin County issues that the House District 64 is dealing with.
Thanks. And I know you do have a lot of connections in the district. So how do you feel that, I know these times are really challenging for every candidate, but how do you feel that you're connecting with other people? Because I know I have done some canvassing in that district in the past, and it is obviously huge geographically, but also interest-wise, it's pretty, it's very diverse. So how do you think you're doing?
How do I think I'm doing?
Yeah.
Well, everybody tells you to your face that you're great, right? Like, oh, yeah, totally, I'm going to vote for you if for no other reason than to get you off the porch. It's fun. I think the thing that's, and I might be going totally off from your question, but it's really fun experiencing different places in the district. So having spent 25 years in there and having built, done a ton of work. When I first got out of college, I worked for a concrete company, and we did probably, a quarter of the sidewalks and driveways in Elk Grove. Right? So I watched Elk Grove go from the 17th house up to 100 houses built out. I think about like the Depot or the the Fox Run subdivisions, right? And watching those come up. And then just this weekend we went down and we canvassed West Yellowstone. And West Yellowstone was, having been through West Yellowstone at a minimum once a month for the last 25 years. I'm in places in West Yellowstone I've never seen. I'm in alleyways that have, 12-unit apartments off of them that you always kind of knew had to be there because, seasonal employees, seasonal workers need a place to live too. But now all of a sudden you're like walking through West Yellowstone in those places. So I don't know. It feels good, right? I'm getting a really good reaction from people, but this isn't really about feelings. And I guess that's, that goes to my governing philosophy. This is not about my feelings about how the race is going. It's about metrics. And at the end of the day, I need, 3,400 votes to my opponent's 3,399. And that's really the only feeling that matters. But it feels good. The positive response I get, even from people that aren't ideologically inclined to agree with me on everything, is very positive. It makes you, the people out there make you remember why it is that we chose to stay in Montana in the first place. And that really hits home.
Thanks, that's good.
That's awesome. I got to flip over to my list of questions that I have in advance, but what is your particular passion or issue that you feel will come up in the 2021 legislature that you want to tackle? Like what do you think is coming that you think you're going to be really well positioned to influence or impact in the session?
It's funny because I think that's kind of shifted. I filed to run on March 9th, and it was I think it was less than a week later that we had our first, confirmed COVID case in Montana. By the end of the month, Bozeman, we watched the local authorities, issue a whole series of orders about bars and restaurants. And And what jumped out to me at that point was like, oh, I mean, the budgetary implications of this are huge, right? And so I've got a couple things that are near and dear to my heart. Education. I got 2 kids in high school, staring down how to pay for college and healthcare, right? That I wouldn't be able to run my business if we hadn't of instituted a whole variety of ways of getting health insurance into the hands of people like me. So those are like 2 really, really, close to the heart issues. And then so throw a pandemic, global pandemic and economic collapse, and we were at 25% unemployment nationwide, 20% in Montana come mid-April, and there's this bright flashing red light, budget crisis because Montana's got a mandated balanced budget. So how do we start squaring some of those things, paying our teachers, paying for the maintenance and our educational facilities so we can keep having the great education system that we've got, and how do we keep paying for that Medicaid expansion, because those are really big numbers and those are challenging. And so I think I bring a really good background to that, having run a business, having done an MBA. I think I'm very well attuned to reading a P&L and a balance sheet and like, okay, how are you going to start shifting money around? How do you have the conversations with the accountants and with the actuaries at the Department of Revenue on how to deal with that? I'm a little bit more optimistic 6 months later. We're down, and I haven't looked lately, but last I looked was 3 or 4 weeks ago, but 10%, 11% unemployment. Certainly bad, but not 25% bad. And given the PPP money and the EIDL money and the extended unemployment benefits, that's blunted a lot of the effect on the local economy. So I still think it's going to be a big deal. I don't think it's going to be as big of a deal as it is. I don't think you want to raise taxes in the middle of an economic crisis. If somebody wanted to talk to me about doing a loan out of the Montana Coal Trust to pay for facilities, school facilities, sort of long-term investments, that kind of thing, I think we'd start talking about how we come up with enough money to pay for those things that we are committed to carrying through until the economy gets itself back on its feet. And I think I bring a thoughtful, reasoned, and experienced approach to that. So I kind of tied in a lot of my other issues. One of my biggest issues, totally off on a different tangent, but I got into starting my own company, I should say, because really unhappy about a lot of the environmental impacts of what was happening in my industry. And so the environment, and whether we're talking infrastructure, whether we're talking urban sprawl, whether we're talking climate change, I think those all really come together in land use planning. And one of my biggest, something that's really jumped out to me over the last decade of working locally is the number of ways that the state hamstrings localities from addressing some of these problems on the local level. And I think we could do a lot at Helena to empower localities to do a better job of promoting infill, promoting affordable housing, coming up with mechanisms to create those things, and do that in a cost-effective and efficient way.
Awesome. Cool. What other questions does anyone have?
I have, go ahead, Patty. Hi, Patty.
Hi. Public lands, how has that come up in your discussion with people in the district?
Sure.
Their views on public lands and some jobs or the economy of the recreational economy and those issues related to public lands and the value of public lands to Montanans.
Yeah, I don't want to reinforce gender stereotypes, but the men in this district are really concerned about their public lands. Women are very concerned about education. There seems to be a hot button on both of those. And, you know, I said it a little earlier. People like me, my cohort that graduated from Bozeman High, right, watched a lot of people leave. I mean, a whole bunch of people left for college, and we watched them trickle back over the years. And my campaign manager and I graduated from high school together, and he and his family moved back 5 or 7 years ago. And there's this sort of the Montana values that why is it that you would give up, you know, the better job or, you know, more benefits or all the things that sort of an urban professional job, in his case in Boston, gave him, and move your family back to Montana. And public lands and education, right? That we keep coming back to those, that all of us that stayed here, public lands are a real touchstone, right? That's a big part of why we stayed and why we sacrificed better jobs, better economic opportunities to be here. And so I have not gotten out to play in my district nearly the way I wanted to this summer. I was like, oh, people are going to cancel contracts and it'll be tough financially, but you know, we'll go out and we'll spend weekends, you know, out on the river or go hiking or all of these things. And it hasn't been that way. You know, turns out campaigning takes up basically all of your weekends. But it is a touchstone, right? That's everybody almost. 90% of people in that district are here specifically because they really treasure that access to the outdoors. And whether that's fishing, hunting, you know, rock climbing, hiking, you know, being out on the raft on the Gallatin, all those things. That's really central to who we are.
Yeah. Denise, did you have a question?
I do. I just have a question regarding if you've come up with this when you're on the trail, or a statewide sales tax or a Gallatin resort tax. What are your thoughts on that? Have you been getting some feedback when you're knocking doors and out meeting people on that topic?
Yep. So I go back. I don't know. We'll go back to formative memories. And I think it was the first election that I was old enough to vote in. Dorothy Bradley had pretty much staked her career as an up and coming Democrat on a sales tax, and I think that went down by about a 2-to-1 vote. I think it was 96. And we never heard from Dorothy Bradley again, and we never heard from a sales tax again. I'm oversimplifying, but so I'm very cautious. Montanans are very proud about not having a sales tax now, and I've got some policy frustrations with the sales tax too. That said, in this district, in House District 64, the local option sales tax has been an absolute lifesaver for West Yellowstone and for Big Sky. The one that I keep going back to is you know, all of these issues tie together. In Bozeman, we tax property at 3 mills and then put that money into a fund to try to build some more affordable housing. So we raise rents, we raise property taxes, we raise the cost of housing to be able to build more affordable housing. It's fundamentally disconnected from, it's a little bit like using your tobacco tax money to fund public health that's not directly related to tobacco, because if the tax does its job, then it gets smaller and smaller over time and your costs stay the same. So Big Sky has, I don't know, 50 new condos. People have just started moving in. I just drove through it on the way home from West the other day. Up there, they got donated land. They took that tourist tax and used that to fund a bunch of the construction costs, right? So now we've got 50 units of affordable housing for people that live and work in people that work in Big Sky, they can now live in the community where they work because of that. And so I think affordable housing, I think of the infrastructure that West Yellowstone has been able to provide, to make sure that we've got parking space for our RVs, that we've got water. Long conversation there, but kind of speaking, we've got water and we've got sewer capacity to handle the tourists that come to Yellowstone in the summertime. That we've given them a tool to have the roads and the infrastructure, the police, the fire that they need to be able to service Yellowstone National Park. So I guess where this all comes to, I'd have to think long and hard about a statewide sales tax. I'm not going to unilaterally oppose it, but if the people of Montana get to a point where they want to have it, I guess I'm not going to be a leader on it, but I'll go along on that one. When it comes to the local option sales tax, I think that's a critical tool. I think that West Yellowstone, that Big Sky, Whitefish have shown how important that is. And I really think that needs to be extended at a minimum to some of our other unincorporated areas, to Four Corners and Gateway. And I think outside my district, I think Bozeman needs it too. So Gallatin County, Park County, they absolutely need that local option sales taxes to provide infrastructure, to provide services to all the tourist traffic we get. But statewide, I'm uncomfortable going there.
Emily, do you have any last question? If you're there. Or Patty, do you have any other questions?
I'm trying to think.
Well, I can ask. I can
You
ask
go.
one.
Go
Yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
So, what are the two things that you need from people to help you, win this race? What are some things that your campaign needs or you need? How can we help? How can, the people on this call help, or people who are watching
Sure.
later?
I mean, so we got two things that we need, right? We need to get votes, right? So call it 3,400 votes. I can only knock on so many doors, and really this district only has so many doors that are really knockable. And so I need help with contact, with personal outreach. We've got some pretty good tools through the MDLCC. I got to make sure I get the acronym right. Some pretty good texting apps. And so anybody that's on this can, we've got an app that can cross-reference anybody that's in your phone list with persuadable people in district. Say, hey, this is my friend Brian Popiel, or I saw Brian on this Zoom conference. He's a really intelligent, really thoughtful guy. He'd be a great representative for this district, be a really good change, the kind of leadership we need in Helena, in a relatively short deal. So being able to reach out, whether it's through a personal text, right? We can do mass texting. I'm not a big believer in that. Personal phone calls. We definitely could use some help phone banking those people that are harder to reach. So contacts. And then the other one, my accounting professor in my MBA program always said, he said, Brian, in this class, I said everybody, it wasn't just me. He said, no matter what question I ask, cash is king, right? You say, what's the top marginal tax rate if under these conditions to your, and he'd call on people, and it was all distance learning like this. So he'd call on everybody here and he'd catch people asleep, and he'd, cash is king, right? You're like, all right, good answer, you win. So fundraising, reaching out and chipping away at the fundraising bit by bit, because we're going to spend a fair bit of money on reaching those people that are trickier to reach. Canvassing's cheap, but mailing you know, doing some video, doing some social media, that adds up and gets expensive. So those are the two things that we need.
Yeah. Are you going to do a mailer or at least one?
Yeah, we got a few
Okay.
planned, and we're doing that in coordination with folks up in Helena.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those anybody that tunes into this can look in their mailbox in the next little bit and should be getting something or other.
Awesome. Perfect.
I don't want to get into dueling mailers though. Dr. Jane's going to be able to outspend me 10 to 1, 100 to 1, whatever it is. I think she put $22,000 of her own money into the primary alone. So we're not going to keep up with her with money. We just need enough to make sure that we get to sort of, you know, a little bit of contact with anybody persuadable in the district.
Right. Because when you know, if you don't, you know, she is putting in her personal money. But, you know, when you don't have money, what do you have instead? You have time. And,
Right.
and if you can, you know, you can win on time if you put in the work.
That's
so,
what we're counting on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other questions or thoughts to share? Or Brian, do you have questions for anyone else? Like,
you know, feedback, I don't know. I kind of need to know how, I said earlier on, like my feelings don't really matter that much, right? The only thing that matters is getting to that win number. So feedback, if you see something out there, if you see something that there's a disconnect, you know, I had a good friend that used to live in Big Sky that sent me a text back in the primary, said, "Hey, Brian, you know, there are signs everywhere and there's no Brian Popiel sign. So get on that," right? That sort of feedback from what other people looking at this with a different set of eyes are seeing. You know, quick email, Facebook message to the Facebook page. I'm really public with my phone number. I'm accustomed to getting calls at all sorts of times. So in my normal life. So, you know, I try to be kind of an open book and try to be really available to hear that feedback and try to incorporate feedback into all the things that I'm doing.
awesome. Any other questions?
No, I just want to say, you know, I'm excited for you, Brian. I think it's great. You're working hard. I hope that the district just understands the importance of getting some great leadership in there at this time. And, you know, I'm calling people that I know out there that I've been friends with. And, you know, I think we just got to keep going harder and harder and harder and just keep doing it because it's going to flip.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's pretty true. I think that's really true. I think, like, yeah, said that before. I think there's a hunger for some leadership. Yeah.
So keep up the good work.
Yeah.
We'll try.
Awesome. Well, I mean, we could just sit here for another 10 minutes and stare at each other, but I think Brian should go celebrate his anniversary.
Well, thank you.
So, but if anyone has questions about Brian, all of his information is also linked on the Gallatin Democrats website. So GallatinDemocrats.com. He's also our featured candidate right now on the homepage, so you get a little intro to him. We'll also be posting this video and sharing it out so that people can, you know, hear from you as well. And hopefully we'll do this again with you, Brian. I think it'd be really great to do this again closer to either the ballots going out or the actual election. But I'm going to say the ballots going out because the message right now is vote early.
Sure.
Yep. You know, so ballots will be mailed on October 9th. And so people will expect those by around the 14th or 15th. Vote as soon as you get them. Vote up and down the ballot. If you have questions about candidates, come to our website. We've got information on all of them, and just vote, vote, vote. So anyway, thank you, Brian. Thanks for being in the hot seat tonight.
Well, thanks for hosting. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was great to get to know you a little bit better. And Patty, Denise, and Emily, thank you for being on here. And and I hope to see you all again soon.